Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and Weiss Advice here on YouTube. Here at my new apartment in Miami, so if it sounds really echoey and crazy, I'm sorry, I literally just moved here. So I'm mixing a record and I'm treating drums. I'm doing a few things that I think are kind of important and interesting when it comes to drum bus processing, and I'm also doing something that I think is very unique that's creating a really, really cool sound, and I wanted to share that stuff with you. So let's jump on in here. I'm going to share the end result first. So let's pop on over here, and it sounds like this. And I wanted to share how I got that. So let's pop open the actual drum stems. I've got all this stuff. And the first thing that I want to point out here that I think is pretty important is what I am not doing. I have an ambient track, a crash cymbal, and a hi-hat track. I am not using those. Just because I have them doesn't mean that I absolutely need them. All of the cymbal stuff, I'm getting that from the overheads. The bit of ambience that I'm getting from the rooms. And that's enough. I want a tighter sound. I want something that really highlights the kick and the snare. So there's that. All right, looking at the drum bus. So drum bus is really simple. I'm just adding a couple dB of high-end 5K shelf using this Mixwave Electrodyne 511. I'll give you the before and after on that. Just kicks a little bit of life into it. Nothing particularly crazy there, but I'm mixing into that because otherwise I would just be doing the same top end boost on every individual track, and there's really no reason to do that. So let's start from the overheads here. Overhead sounded like this. Here's my after. So there's a few things going on. First of all, I am taking out a couple of resonances that are showing up in the mids. So these are all medium-sized Q dips, all around 3 dB that are just kind of opening up space, mostly for the snare. But without it, it feels like there's definitely some whooshy stuff. You hear it a little bit better on a before and after, or actually an after and before. So with treatment and then without. So you hear all that kind of stuff. I didn't really like that. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm high passing the drums at 150 hertz. Normally, or high passing the overheads. Normally, I do not high pass overheads. People have different feelings about whether or not you should high pass overheads. Most of the time, I'm not doing it. However, sometimes I do it if I want to have a tighter kick sound, which in this particular case I did. So getting some of that farther tone, some of that more roomy tone out of the deep low end helped the sound overall. And then because I'm going to end up doing a lot of compression and clipping on the individual drum tracks, I ended up doing some low-level compression here, some upward compression with the Waves MV2. This was more in response to when you hear the close-up mics, it makes more sense. But I'll give you the before and after real quick. And so it gives you that really forward sound, that really in-your-face kind of thing, which, you know, I happen to like. All right, let's get on to the snares. Now, the snares are pretty minimal. The main thing that I'm doing here is I'm really tightly phase aligning the secondary snare captures. There's a snare side, a snare bottom, and there's a snare top. And then I'm summing them all down into a single snare track. Now the snare track is getting a little bit of treatment, Mixwave Pultec here, so nice little top end shelf going on, and a little bit of bottom end at 100 hertz just to kind of beef it up. But the main thing here is Orange Clip. This record is drawing on a lot of hip hop stuff. There's like rappers on the record as well as like a soul R&B singer on the hook. So I wanted to make the snare feel a little bit more programmed, if you will, and less like natural, organic. So the snare sounds like this originally. And then with the clipper, so obviously becomes very colorful, definitely like a slightly pancakey sound, but it does a good job of retaining the transient. And remember that I'm also getting transient from the overhead, which is really important. We're not hearing this in a box. So I just want a really forward in your face sound. And then let's add in the little bit of top and bottom at the end. And bring in the overheads. So even though it's like 6 dB of clipping on the individual like snare sum, it doesn't feel that way once the overheads come in because the overheads have a lot more natural dynamic to them. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And then the same thing going on with the kicks. Little phase alignment with the kicks. I've got this, I don't know what kind of capture this is, but it's like a very soft version of the kick here. Like super pillowy, and then there's a kick in. And a kick out. All right, so, which, interesting, I wonder if these are mislabeled because this actually sounds more like if the kick out was like right up against the head of the drum, as opposed to like a kick out that's a little further back. So maybe this is actually a kick out that's further back. That would make sense because that's what it sounds like. But anyway, checking the phase on all that stuff, and then it's coming down to orange clip again, and again, clipping it. So without. And here you can hear a little tiny bit of breakup, but again, once we bring in the overheads, it doesn't really register. There it is. And then the room mic sounded great. I pulled it down because I didn't want a particularly roomy sound, so I have it down by about 11 dB. But it sounds like this. Sounds good. Sounds like a nice, well-balanced, good-sounding room. So we bring that in, and then that gives us our primary drum sound when it all comes together. It's all up for a second. Now I've got a couple interesting things going on with the toms. I have a little bit of decapitator on the high and mid tom, but the floor tom I have like a lot of stuff going on because I wanted it to sound really crazy. So this is what it sounds like when it's regular. Okay, pretty normal. And then here's what it sounds like with all my processing on. So that sounds absolutely ridiculous when we're in solo mode, but it sounds cool when we're actually in the context of the whole record. I wanted it to be this like growly, ringy, kind of screwed up sort of sound because it really only punctuates when the verse goes into the chorus. So I just wanted to give it a little bit of energy there. And the way I'm doing it is I'm using a subharmonic generator to boost up some of the really low tones. And then I have a delay that's extending the tail. And I'm using tremolator here to like make the whole thing wiggle. So it's like a really weird sound. Like I wanted that vibration in there just to make it feel like the whole earth was kind of shaking. So it's a weird sound. I don't know exactly like how in my mind I formulated it or like what the method behind the madness was. I was just feeling it out. I was like, oh, let me try this. And then I liked it. So there you go. So once I did all that, the last ingredient here, which I think really brings the sauce together, here's the drum bus just committed. So what I did was I exported this and then I went on to ariamastering.com, which is a online automated mastering service that I use. But this time I used it only for the drum bus. I set it on the E setting, which is like the most gentle setting. So it didn't really do a lot of compression. It just kind of like balanced it out, gave it some like really nice little tone and saturation, gave it like a little bit more body, but it's a very unique, visceral sound. So the before and after is this. Here's what it sounded like before I ran it through. And here's after. So it's not vastly, vastly different in solo. And actually, let me send this off to my instrument bus. Pretty sure my instrument bus is literally just flat transfer. Yeah, it's just flat, so it's not doing anything. But let's listen in the context of the record. You can already tell that the drums sound good, but they just don't command a lot of authority. And that's really the difference here with the Aria processing. There's like two things that really change. The first is that just the drums have more oomph to them. They have like a little bit more grit and authority, I guess is the best way of saying it. Like it feels more solid in the record. And then also the way the rhythm picks up, like the slight bit of compression that it's doing when the drum is doing the k-k, like the two eighth note hits, it feels a little bit more connected and gives it a little bit more groove. So just listen to where the snare is landing. Thing, right? Now listen with the Aria. Like I feel like I hear where the kick is landing in that little sequence a little bit better, which I think is really good for the groove. So a couple of subtle things that are probably going to make a pretty big difference at the end of the day. But anyway, I wanted to point that out because I thought it was like a neat little thing, because I think as engineers, we all kind of have this instinct of wanting to do things that are like whenever we get something and it's intended for a specific purpose, our first instinct is, okay, how can we use this for an unintended purpose? So this is a really good example of that, where I'm using a mastering program, which normally would go over the entire record, but I'm using it very specifically on the drum bus, and I find that the E setting works really well for that. So wanted to show all of those cool techniques. Anyway, let's wrap it up here. I hope that you dig this video. If you do, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification so you get notified. And lastly, you know what we say here at Weiss Advice. We are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.